First contact with the apex. The emergency alert pierced through every comm channel in the Artemis research station, its harsh tone drawing Dr. Sarah Chen away from her xenobiology samples. Through the reinforced viewing windows, she watched as the station's defense shields flickered to life, casting an iridescent blue glow across the facility's outer hull. Unidentified biological entities detected in Sector 7. The AI's calm voice announced, "All personnel, implement Protocol Omega immediately." Sarah's hands moved swiftly across her console, securing her samples. After 3 years studying alien life forms on this remote outpost, she had grown accustomed to emergency protocols. But something felt different this time. The tension in the air was palpable, even through the sterile laboratory environment. Commander Marcus Rodriguez's voice crackled through the station's comm system. "This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. We have multiple Night Stalker signatures approaching the station. All non-essential personnel proceed to emergency shelters immediately." Sarah froze. Night Stalkers. Every human colony in the Outer Rim had heard the stories. Entire settlements going dark, no survivors, no bodies, just haunting footage of shadow-like creatures moving with impossible speed and precision. The scientific community had dismissed them as exaggerated tales, born from the isolation of deep space. Yet here they were. Instead of heading to the shelters, Sarah found herself moving toward the observation deck. Her scientific curiosity overwhelmed her fear, a trait that had both advanced and hindered her career. Through the reinforced windows, she saw them. Massive fluid forms moving through the void of space, their bodies seeming to bend light around them. They were beautiful in their terrifying efficiency, like living shadows with an intelligence that radiated through their movements. "Dr. Chen, what the hell are you doing?" Commander Rodriguez appeared beside her, his face tight with concern. "You need to get to the shelters. Look at their movement patterns." Sarah pointed to the nearest creature. "They're not attacking randomly. There's a structure to it, a language in their movements." Rodriguez grabbed her arm, ready to drag her to safety, but stopped as he followed her gaze. The Night Stalkers were indeed moving in what appeared to be deliberate patterns, almost like a dance. Their formations shifted and changed, creating complex geometric shapes in the space around the station. "They're trying to communicate," Sarah whispered, her mind racing with possibilities. "Commander, we need to record everything. This could be our first real chance to understand them." The station's defenses continued to hold, but the Night Stalkers made no aggressive moves. Instead, they continued their hypnotic display, their bodies weaving complex patterns through space. Sarah worked frantically at her console, recording and analyzing their movements. Hours passed, and gradually a pattern emerged. Sarah's algorithms began to detect recurring sequences in the Night Stalkers' movements, similar to mathematical equations, but expressed through motion rather than numbers. "They're not just predators," Sarah announced to the command center, where the station's senior staff had gathered. "They're sophisticated beings using movement as a form of language. The attacks on our colonies, they weren't acts of aggression. They were attempts at communication." Commander Rodriguez leaned over her shoulder, studying the data. "Can you prove it?" Sarah pulled up a series of recordings. "Look at these patterns. They're expressing complex mathematical concepts through movement. The reason they've been drawn to our settlements is that they detected our technological signatures. They're curious about us, just as we are about them." As if to confirm her theory, the Night Stalkers outside began a new series of movements, more deliberate and slower than before. Sarah's algorithms worked to decode them in real time, and slowly, unmistakably, the patterns began to match known mathematical sequences: prime numbers, the Fibonacci sequence, basic geometric principles. "They're proving their intelligence to us," Sarah breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "They've been trying to reach out all this time, but we were too afraid to see it." Commander Rodriguez studied the creatures with new eyes. "If you're right, this changes everything. But how do we respond? How do we communicate back?" Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. We need to think differently. They don't communicate through sound or light like most species we've encountered. They communicate through movement and mathematics. We need to speak their language." The commander nodded slowly, a plan forming. "Dr. Chen, I'm giving you full access to the station's external lighting systems and positioning thrusters. If you think you can establish communication, do it. But be careful. If you're wrong about this, you could be putting everyone at risk." Sarah's hands flew across her console, programming a sequence of movements for the station's external lights and small positioning thrusters. She matched the mathematical patterns the Night Stalkers had shown them, adding simple variations to show understanding and intelligence. The response was immediate. The Night Stalkers ceased their previous patterns and began mirroring the station's signals, adding their own variations. It was like watching a conversation in pure mathematics, expressed through light and motion in the void of space. "My God," Rodriguez whispered, "we're actually talking to them." Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she watched the exchange unfold. This was why she had become a xenobiologist, not just to study alien life, but to understand it, to bridge the gaps between species that seemed insurmountable. As the hours passed, the exchange grew more complex. The Night Stalkers began sharing information about themselves through their mathematical language, their origins, their society, their understanding of the universe. They were not the mindless predators humanity had feared, but a highly advanced species that experienced reality in a fundamentally different way than any other known race. The first contact that had begun in fear was transforming into something extraordinary. The beginning of an understanding between two radically different forms of life. Humanity had taken its first step toward not just surviving the Night Stalkers, but potentially forming an alliance that could reshape the galaxy. Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. The real challenge would be convincing both species to move past their fears and preconceptions. But as she watched the continuing exchange of mathematical poetry between human technology and alien grace, she felt hope. Sometimes the most terrifying things in the universe turned out to be the most beautiful. You just had to be brave enough to look closer. The commander nodded slowly, a plan forming. "Dr. Chen, I'm giving you full access to the station's external lighting systems and positioning thrusters. If you think you can establish communication, do it. But be careful. If you're wrong about this, you could be putting everyone at risk." Sarah's hands flew across her console, programming a sequence of movements for the station's external lights and small positioning thrusters. She matched the mathematical patterns the Night Stalkers had shown them, adding simple variations to show understanding and intelligence. The response was immediate. The Night Stalkers ceased their previous patterns and began mirroring the station's signals, adding their own variations. It was like watching a conversation in pure mathematics, expressed through light and motion in the void of space. "My God," Rodriguez whispered, "we're actually talking to them." Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she watched the exchange unfold. This was why she had become a xenobiologist, not just to study alien life, but to understand it, to bridge the gaps between species that seemed insurmountable. As the hours passed, the exchange grew more complex. The Night Stalkers began sharing information about themselves through their mathematical language, their origins, their society, their understanding of the universe. They were not the mindless predators humanity had feared, but a highly advanced species that experienced reality in a fundamentally different way than any other known race. The first contact that had begun in fear was transforming into something extraordinary. The beginning of an understanding between two radically different forms of life. Humanity had taken its first step toward not just surviving the Night Stalkers, but potentially forming an alliance that could reshape the galaxy. Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. The real challenge would be convincing both species to move past their fears and preconceptions. But as she watched the continuing exchange of mathematical poetry between human technology and alien grace, she felt hope. Sometimes the most terrifying things in the universe turned out to be the most beautiful. You just had to be brave enough to look closer. "Did we get everything?" she asked Kumar, her voice shaky as she stepped out of the chamber. He nodded, looking stunned. The data streams are incredible. It's going to take years just to process what was exchanged in those few minutes. But Sarah, your neural patterns. I know, she said, feeling the change in her own thoughts. I can still see it. The mathematical relationships in everything. It's like having a new sense awakened. Commander Rodriguez stepped forward, his expression a mix of awe and concern. What does this mean for the project? Sarah turned to look at Axiom, who was expressing complex equations of satisfaction through its movements. It means we've done it. We found a way to truly understand each other. But more than that. She paused, her mind racing with possibilities. I think we've discovered a way to evolve both our species. The neural bridge doesn't just translate, it transforms. It shows us new ways of thinking, new ways of seeing reality itself. The implications were staggering. If other humans could be trained to use the neural bridge, to see reality as both human and Night Stalker, the potential for advancement was unlimited. Two radically different approaches to science and technology could be combined, leading to breakthroughs neither species could achieve alone. As the team began analyzing the data from the first bridge session, Sarah knew they had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. Humanity had not just made contact with an alien species, they had found a way to grow beyond their own limitations, to see the universe through new eyes. The question now was, how would this transformation reshape both their species? The alliance forms. The Great Hall of the United Earth Council buzzed with tension as delegates from every human colony gathered to witness an unprecedented event. 1 year after the successful neural bridge experiment, humanity was about to formalize its alliance with the Night Stalkers. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the podium, her mind simultaneously processing the scene in both human visual terms and the mathematical patterns she had learned to perceive. Beside her, Axiom's fluid form shifted in complex equations that expressed both ceremony and anticipation. Behind them, a dozen other Night Stalkers hovered, their movements synchronized in what Sarah now recognized as their version of formal attire. Distinguished delegates, Sarah began, her voice steady despite the historical weight of the moment. Today marks not just an alliance between species, but the beginning of a new chapter in the story of intelligent life. Through the Neural Bridge program, we have learned that our differences are not barriers but opportunities for growth. The Neural Bridge technology had evolved rapidly over the past year. What began as a single experimental chamber had grown into a network of facilities across human space. Hundreds of specially trained humans had now experienced the transformation Sarah had pioneered, learning to see reality through the dual lens of human intuition and Night Stalker mathematical perception. The results speak for themselves. Sarah continued, gesturing to the holographic displays showing the fruits of human-Night Stalker collaboration. New technologies that combined human engineering with Night Stalker mathematical principles. Medical breakthroughs that used the Night Stalker's understanding of spatial relationships to revolutionize surgery. Advances in space travel that had cut journey times between colonies by half. But not everyone was convinced. Admiral Chen Wei, Sarah's own cousin, stood up from the military delegation. While these achievements are impressive, we cannot ignore the security implications. The Night Stalkers have access to our most advanced facilities. What guarantees do we have that this alliance won't leave us vulnerable? Sarah had expected this question. She nodded to Axiom, who moved forward, its form expressing complex equations that the Neural Bridge graduates in the room could now understand. Through their shared mathematical language, Axiom revealed what the Night Stalkers had detected at the edge of known space, a threat that neither species could face alone. The Void Hunters, Sarah translated for those without Neural Bridge training. A species that exists in dimensions beyond our normal perception. The Night Stalkers have been holding them at bay for centuries, but their numbers are growing. They don't just threaten individual worlds, they threaten the fabric of space-time itself. The hall erupted in murmurs as Sarah displayed the Night Stalkers' recordings of Void Hunter incursions. Even in translated form, the footage was terrifying. reality itself seeming to tear apart where these beings emerge. This is why the alliance is not just beneficial but necessary, Sarah continued. The Night Stalkers understand the mathematical principles that govern dimensional barriers. We humans excel at turning theoretical knowledge into practical solutions. Together, we can develop defenses that neither species could create alone. Admiral Chen stood again, but this time his expression had changed. You're proposing joint military operations. More than that, Sarah replied. We're proposing complete integration. Human ships guided by Night Stalker spatial awareness. Night Stalker dimensional theory implemented through human engineering. A combined force that can operate in ways our enemies cannot predict or counter. To demonstrate, Sarah activated another hologram. It showed the first prototype of a human Night Stalker hybrid vessel. The ship's design was unlike anything humanity had created before. Its geometry seemed to shift and flow, combining solid human engineering with the fluid adaptability of Night Stalker biotechnology. This is the synthesis, Sarah explained. Built by human hands but incorporating Night Stalker principles of spatial manipulation. Its hull can reconfigure in response to threats. Its engines use mathematical principles to bend space in ways we're only beginning to understand. And this is just the beginning. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just an alliance. It was an opportunity for both species to evolve beyond their current limitations. Axiom moved forward again, its form expressing complex equations that Sarah had come to recognize as their equivalent of a formal pledge. The Night Stalkers offer not just their knowledge but their trust, she translated. They believe, as we do, that our species are stronger together than apart. The voting that followed was nearly unanimous. As the alliance was formally ratified, Sarah felt a profound sense of achievement. The fear that had marked first contact had transformed into something remarkable, a partnership that could reshape the galaxy. But even as celebrations began, Sarah's mind was already turning to the challenges ahead. The Void Hunters were drawing closer, and the combined forces of humanity and the Night Stalkers would soon be tested. The alliance was just the beginning. Now they had to prove that two radically different species could not just cooperate, but triumph together. As she watched humans and Night Stalkers beginning to interact more freely, some humans attempting their first clumsy translations of mathematical movement language, while Night Stalkers adjusted their patterns to be more easily understood, Sarah saw the future taking shape. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about becoming something greater than either species had imagined possible. Galactic power shift. The bridge of the synthesis thrummed with combined human and Night Stalker energy as the hybrid vessel moved through dimensional space. Dr. Sarah Chen, now Admiral Chen, stood at the command center, her enhanced mind processing both the standard tactical displays and the complex mathematical patterns that showed the true nature of space around them. Void Hunter signatures detected, announced Lieutenant Maya Patel, her neural bridge implant allowing her to interpret the Night Stalker sensor data. Three-dimensional rifts forming at coordinates Lambda 7. Sarah watched as Axiom, now her second in command, expressed a series of rapid mathematical equations that translated into battle formations. The bridge crew, both human and Night Stalker, responded instantly, their months of joint training evident in their seamless coordination. Battle stations, Sarah ordered, her voice calm despite the gravity of the situation. This would be the first major engagement between the combined human Night Stalker fleet and the Void Hunters. Everything they had built together would be tested here. The synthesis's hull began to reconfigure, its geometry shifting to match the mathematical principles that would best defend against dimensional attacks. Around them, the rest of the fleet, 20 ships of varying sizes, all hybrid designs, moved into formation. The Void Hunters emerged from their rifts, their forms defying normal spacetime. To unaugmented eyes, they appeared as shifting masses of impossible angles and non-Euclidean geometry. But through her neural bridge enhancement, Sarah could see them for what they were, beings that existed partially in higher dimensions, their movements leaving tears in the fabric of reality. They're targeting the colony's dimensional anchors, Maya reported, referring to the devices that kept normal space stable around human settlements. If those fall, the entire system could be pulled into dimensional chaos. Sarah nodded to Axiom, who began executing their prepared strategy. The Night Stalkers had faced these enemies before, but never with human technology and tactical thinking to support them. It was time to show what their alliance could really do. Execute Operation Tesseract, Sarah commanded. The fleet broke formation in ways that would have seemed random to outside observers, but followed perfect mathematical patterns. Human weapons systems, enhanced by Night Stalker spatial understanding, fired precisely calculated bursts that hit the Void Hunters across multiple dimensional planes. The enemy responded with attacks that bent space itself, trying to tear the human Night Stalker ships apart. But the hybrid vessel's adaptive hulls shifted in response, their geometry flowing to disperse the dimensional energy. It was like watching a dance of mathematics and physics, with the fate of the colony hanging in the balance. Their attack patterns are adapting, Maya warned. They're trying to find weaknesses in our dimensional shielding. Sarah's enhanced mind raced through calculations, combining human tactical innovation with Night Stalker mathematical insight. New pattern, she ordered, her thoughts flowing through both verbal commands and mathematical expressions. Maya, configure the quantum arrays to match Axiom's resonance frequency. We're going to show them something they've never seen before. The synthesis's systems hummed as human technology synchronized with Night Stalker biological processes. Energy began to build, following equations that existed in spaces between dimensions. Around them, the rest of the fleet moved into complementary positions, creating a vast geometric pattern in space. Now, Sarah commanded. The combined fleet released their energy in a perfectly synchronized burst. The attack wasn't just physical. It was mathematical, a precisely calculated restructuring of local space-time that caught the Void Hunters in a web of dimensional locks. The enemy forces writhed as they found themselves trapped in normal space, their ability to shift between dimensions temporarily neutralized. Without their dimensional advantages, they were vulnerable to conventional weapons. The fleet's guns spoke in unison, their fire guided by both human accuracy and Night Stalker spatial awareness. In moments, it was over. The Void Hunters, unable to escape back to their higher dimensions, were systematically eliminated. As the last enemy signatures faded from their sensors, a cheer went up from the human crew members, while the Night Stalkers expressed their satisfaction through complex mathematical harmonies. Damage report, Sarah called, though she could already see through the mathematical patterns that their losses had been minimal. The hybrid ships had performed beyond even their most optimistic projections. Minor structural stress on decks 3 through 7, Maya reported, already being reconfigured. All systems operating within parameters. The colony's dimensional anchors are secure. Sarah turned to Axiom, who was expressing equations of analysis and satisfaction. The battle had proven what they had theorized. The combination of human and Night Stalker capabilities created something greater than either species could achieve alone. News of the victory spread quickly through both human and Night Stalker space. The successful defense of the colony using hybrid technology and combined tactics marked a turning point. Other species who had been watching the human Night Stalker alliance with skepticism now began to take notice. As the fleet regrouped and began repairs, Sarah received word that representatives from 3 other spacefaring races were requesting meetings to discuss possible cooperation. The balance of power in the galaxy was shifting, centered on the unprecedented success of human Night Stalker collaboration. "We've done more than win a battle," Sarah told her crew as they secured from action stations. "We've shown the galaxy a new way forward, not through dominance or submission, but through true cooperation and mutual growth." Axiom expressed a complex equation that translated roughly to evolution through unity. Sarah smiled, understanding the deeper truth in the mathematical statement. Their alliance hadn't just changed their species, it was changing the very nature of civilization in the galaxy. Evolution of 2 species. 5 years after the Battle of Lambda 7, the human colony world of New Horizon had become something unprecedented in galactic history. The first true hybrid settlement. From orbit, the city's architecture was a mesmerizing blend of human engineering and Night Stalker mathematical principles, buildings that shifted and flowed while maintaining perfect structural integrity. Dr. Sarah Chen, now Governor Chen, stood in the observation dome of the Unity Center, watching young humans and Night Stalkers interact in the plaza below. Children born after the Alliance played in specially designed spaces where physical reality and mathematical abstraction merge, their minds naturally adapting to understand both worlds. The latest neural bridge graduates have surpassed all previous benchmarks, reported Dr. Maya Patel, who had traded her military role for a position heading the Unity education program. The new generation is achieving in months what took us years to learn. Sarah nodded, her enhanced perception allowing her to see the complex patterns of development in the community below. Humans were learning to express themselves through mathematical movement, while Night Stalkers had begun incorporating human emotional concepts into their equations. They were becoming something new, not quite human, not quite Night Stalker, but a harmonious blend of both. And the dimensional stability readings? Sarah asked, though she could already see the answer in the mathematical currents flowing through the city's structure. Better than ever, Maya confirmed. The Void Hunters haven't attempted an incursion in over 8 months. Our combined defensive systems are proving to be the perfect deterrent. The success of New Horizon had attracted attention from across the galaxy. Diplomatic vessels from dozens of species were now in orbit, their representatives studying how 2 radically different forms of life had managed to not just coexist, but thrive together. Axiom, who had become both Sarah's closest friend and the Night Stalker representative on the colony's governing council, approached them. Its form expressed equations of progress and possibility, but also a new concept that had emerged from their years of collaboration: hope, translated into pure mathematics. The university has made another breakthrough. Sarah translated for Maya, reading Axiom's patterns. They found a way to extend neural bridge principles to other species. This was the next great frontier, expanding their success beyond just humans and Night Stalkers. Already, preliminary tests with other races had shown promising results. Each species brought its own unique perspective, adding new dimensions to their growing understanding of the universe. "Governor," a young voice called. Sarah turned to see Marcus Jung, one of the first children born in the hybrid colony. At 12 years old, he moved with the fluid grace of a Night Stalker while speaking perfect English. His neural architecture naturally adapted to both ways of being. "Yes, Marcus." Sarah smiled, seeing both his physical form and the beautiful mathematical patterns that described his existence. "We've been studying pre-Alliance history," he said, his movements unconsciously expressing mathematical concepts as he spoke. "Is it true that humans and Night Stalkers used to fear each other?" Sarah exchanged a look with Axiom, who shifted in a pattern expressing what could only be described as philosophical amusement. "Yes," she answered. "We used to see our differences as threats rather than opportunities." Marcus frowned, the concept clearly difficult for him to grasp. In his world, the blend of human and Night Stalker perspectives was as natural as breathing. But how could anyone not see how perfectly we complement each other? "Sometimes the most obvious truths are the hardest to see," Sarah replied. "We needed to learn to look past our fears and preconceptions. Once we did that, we discovered that our differences weren't weaknesses. They were the key to becoming something greater than we could have imagined." As if to emphasize her point, an alert chimed softly. The latest deep space probe, designed with combined human Night Stalker technology, had detected something extraordinary: signs of dimensional engineering that predated both their species. The discovery promised to reshape their understanding of the galaxy's history. "Shall we assemble a research team?" Maya asked, already knowing the answer. Sarah nodded. "Select the best from both species, and include some of the new generation. Their natural ability to bridge both perspectives will be invaluable." As the sun set over New Horizon, casting the city in a light that seemed to dance with mathematical significance, Sarah reflected on how far they had come. The fear that had marked their first contact had transformed into something beautiful, a genuine evolution of both species, guided not by force or necessity, but by choice and mutual understanding. In the plaza below, a group of human children were attempting to express complex equations through movement, while young Night Stalkers practiced incorporating human emotions into their mathematical language. Their imperfect but enthusiastic efforts represented the future, a future where the boundaries between species dissolved not through the loss of identity, but through the celebration of difference and the joy of learning from each other. "We've created something remarkable here," Sarah said to Aksum, who shifted in patterns of agreement and pride. The Night Stalker expressed a complex equation that Sarah understood perfectly. It translated roughly to, "This is just the beginning." And as she looked out over the city where two species had learned not just to coexist, but to evolve together, Sarah knew Aksum was right. They had not just changed themselves. They had shown the galaxy a new way forward, a path where diversity led not to conflict, but to transformation. The stars above New Horizons seemed brighter somehow, as if reflecting the light of possibility that their alliance had kindled. Humanity and the Night Stalkers had not just survived. They had transcended their original forms to become something new, something greater, something that promised to reshape the very future of life in the galaxy.